the house that nobody wanted. At the far edge of a narrow dirt road, where the asphalt gave up and the forest took over, there stood a house that nobody wanted. Its roof sagged like a tired old man's shoulders. The paint, what little clung to the boards, peeled in greyish curls, the colour of ash and regret. Vines crept up the siding, thin and brittle, their tendrils digging into cracks like fingers trying to hold on to something that was already gone. Every passerby, rare as they were, looked at it only long enough to look away again. Real estate signs had come and gone, each one fading, falling, or rotting at the base before anyone thought to remove it. Bank foreclosure notices had yellowed on the door, edges curled like dead leaves. The mailbox hung open, its hinges rusted solid years ago. No one sent letters anymore, certainly not to that address. Inside, the air was thick and unmoving. Dust floated like slow snow through faint shafts of light that squeezed through the warped window frames. The wallpaper, where it hadn't bubbled or torn, showed ghostly outlines where pictures once hung. There were no sounds, no birds nesting in the rafters, no scurrying of rats beneath the floorboards. Even the forest seemed to keep its distance, as if it, too, had decided this place was best left alone. At night, the house became part of the darkness itself. The trees leaned close, whispering in their wooden tongues, and the wind passed through broken eaves with a low, hollow moan. The sound traveled down the valley and over the road, but few ever heard it. Those who did said it sounded like a sigh, a weary exhale from something that had been waiting too long. It wasn't haunted. Not yet. It was simply forgotten. And sometimes, that's worse. The road was almost invisible by the time he found it. A thin, gravel path veered off from the county highway, swallowed halfway by weeds and the creeping fingers of pine roots. The man slowed his truck to a crawl, the tires crunching against forgotten earth. He wasn't sure what had made him turn there, maybe the way the mist clung to the treetops like a held breath, or the fading, "For sale," sign half buried in tall grass, leaning at an odd angle as if embarrassed to still exist. His name was Caleb Harker, and he wasn't running away so much as he was trying to start over. The world beyond those woods had grown too loud, too crowded, too quick to pave over anything that stood still long enough. So he'd packed the remains of his life into the back of a rusted pickup, tools, books, a battered coffee pot, and driven until the noise faded behind him. When he saw the house, he stopped. It looked as though it had grown out of the earth itself, more ruin than dwelling. A gabled roof caved inward at the middle, shingles scattered like brittle scales. The porch sagged unevenly, and one shutter hung by a single rusted hinge, tapping faintly in the wind like a broken metronome. The windows were blind with grime, and the door bore a jagged crack through its center. It was a thing abandoned by both man and mercy. And yet Caleb stared at it for a long time, his hands resting on the steering wheel, heart ticking slower with each passing moment. It was ugly, yes. But it was an honest kind of ugly. The kind that came from time, not neglect. There was something in the way the house slouched, as though it had weathered storms and simply refused to fall. He knew that kind of stubbornness. He felt it in his own bones. He killed the engine. Silence swallowed everything. Stepping out, he felt the stillness of the place wrap around him, thick, almost physical. The forest was quiet, watching. The air smelled faintly of pine, wet leaves, and rot. His boots sank slightly into the damp soil as he approached the front steps. Each one groaned under his weight. The railing gave a little, but didn't break. He ran a hand along the wood. It was soft, spongy in places, but beneath the rot was strength, a core that hadn't given up. He traced a finger through the dust on the door, leaving a single clean line, and then pushed gently. It opened with a sound like a sigh. Inside was darkness, layered and deep. The smell hit him first, mildew, old wood, and something faintly metallic, like rain on rust. But beneath it all was another scent, faint but unmistakable, earth. Life. Sunlight crept in through a cracked window, slicing through dust motes that hung suspended in the air. The living room was a skeleton of what it once was, a collapsed armchair, a brick fireplace choked with cobwebs, remnants of wallpaper curling off the plaster like molting skin. A bird's nest rested in one of the corners, abandoned long ago. Caleb stepped further inside, his boots leaving clear prints in the dust. He ran his hand along the mantel and smiled faintly. It was solid oak. He could sand that down, bring back its color. He looked at the ceiling joists, warped, but intact. The bones were good. The house wasn't dead, it was just sleeping. He made his way through the room slowly, touching everything as if reacquainting himself with something half-remembered. The kitchen window was shattered, ivy creeping in through the frame, wrapping itself around the handles of old cabinets. He brushed the vines aside and opened one. Empty. A family of mice had once nested there, but the nest had been torn apart, long since cold. In the back hallway, he found a staircase. The steps protested each ascent, but they held. At the top was a long hallway with 4 doors, each closed. He opened the first to find a small bedroom, bare except for a toppled dresser. He righted it, dust puffing up in a golden haze. He could see it now, a bed by the window, the floorboards cleaned and oiled, morning light spilling across the room. He smiled again. For the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him, a quiet spark that had nothing to do with money or escape or obligation. It was purpose. Downstairs, he found the cellar door. It was swollen shut, the handle corroded to the frame. He crouched, tugged, and the metal screeched loose with a sound that made the hair rise on his neck. The air that rushed up was colder than it should have been, stale and wet. He stood at the top of the stairs and peered down, but the darkness was complete. He could smell the damp stone, the dirt floor, the long memory of stillness. Later, he murmured, stepping back. "You can wait." He turned and went back to the front porch. The late afternoon light had softened, filtering through the pines in dappled gold. The house behind him seemed to exhale, as though relieved to have someone's footsteps inside again. He stood there for a long time, hands in his pockets, staring out at the woods. The breeze shifted, carrying the faint rustle of leaves. The forest was quiet, but not hostile. Just waiting. He could see it all now, the porch repaired, the windows clear, the rooms full of light and warmth. It would take months, maybe years, but he didn't care. He would fix the roof, patch the walls, scrub away the smell of decay. He would make it his. Caleb Harker had spent most of his life building houses for other people. This one would be different. This one would be a home, not for a family, not for a profit, but for him alone. He turned to face the house once more. The fading light struck its facade, and for an instant, the peeling paint seemed to shimmer, like old scars catching the sun. "Yeah," he said softly. You've still got a little fight left in you. A crow called in the distance, 3 sharp cries that echoed through the trees. The sound startled him slightly, and when he looked again, he thought he saw movement in the upper window. Just a shadow, maybe. Maybe the curtain shifting with the breeze. He told himself it was nothing. But as he walked back to the truck, the house watched him go, its windows reflecting the setting sun, glowing faintly like eyes that had just begun to wake. Caleb worked until his hands were raw. At first, the house resisted him. Every nail he drove bent sideways. Every board he tried to lift seemed to crumble in his grip. But he kept going. Day after day, week after week, the woods around the property echoed with the steady rhythm of his labor, the scrape of a shovel, the thud of hammer against beam, the rasp of sandpaper on old wood. He woke with the dawn and worked until the moon rose behind the black silhouettes of the pines. His muscles ached, his clothes were permanently stained with dust and oil, and every night he collapsed onto a cot in the living room that smelled faintly of sawdust and coffee. It was an exhausting, endless kind of work, but for the first time in his life, exhaustion felt earned. He spent everything he had. Every dollar from his savings account went into lumber, shingles, paint, and tools. When that ran out, he sold his truck for cash and bought a second-hand generator and a few sheets of drywall. He walked to the nearest town for supplies, 7 miles each way, sometimes hitching rides back with strangers who looked at him sideways when he mentioned where he lived. "You fixing that place?" one of them asked once, squinting through the windshield as the trees thinned and the roofline came into view. "Trying to," Caleb said with a half-smile. The man just shook his head. "Place gives me the creeps." Caleb chuckled softly. "She's just lonely, that's all." And maybe that was true. Because as the weeks turned into months, the house began to change, not quickly, but quietly, like something learning how to breathe again. The roof came first. He tore off the old shingles, one by one, tossing them into a growing heap behind the porch. Beneath the decay, the rafters were solid. He replaced the broken beams, laid down new tar paper, and nailed fresh shingles until his shoulders burned. When the first rain came, he stood outside just to hear the water hit the roof and not leak through. The sound was steady, soothing, a heartbeat. Next came the windows. He scraped away the grime, replaced the broken glass, and built frames from salvaged pine. Sunlight returned to the rooms, soft and golden, pooling across the floorboards. The light made the house look alive again, even in its imperfection. The kitchen was a battlefield, mold cabinets, warped counters, and a sink that refused to drain. He tore it all out, rebuilt it with mismatched wood and old fixtures scavenged from yard sales. The result was uneven, crooked in places, but it was his. When he brewed his first pot of coffee on the new stove, the smell filled the air like memory. He repaired the front porch next, sanding down the splintered boards and coating them with thick varnish. The railing still leaned slightly to the left, no matter how many times he adjusted it, but he grew to love that. It gave the place character, a reminder that perfection was never the goal. Sometimes he talked to the house as he worked. He didn't mean to, it just happened. "You're holding together better than I thought," he'd mutter while tightening bolts. Or, "Don't give up on me yet." And though he knew it was absurd, sometimes the wind seemed to answer, creaking softly through the eaves, rattling a window just once, as though in approval. By winter, the house was warm again. The old fireplace, cleaned and repaired, burned steadily through the nights. He slept near it, listening to the pop and hiss of wood, watching the light flicker across the newly painted walls. The shadows no longer seemed ominous, they were simply part of the home, the way they are in any old place that's loved enough to survive. The neighbors, the few who lived miles away down the main road, began to notice. Sometimes, a mail carrier would stop and ask, "You the one fixing that old place?" He'd nod, and they'd smile a little, curious, maybe even impressed. For decades, the house had been the ugly thing in the woods, the one no one wanted. Now, it was something else. It wasn't beautiful, not exactly, but it was alive. Caleb never saw the change all at once. It crept up on him. One evening, as he sat on the porch sipping coffee from a chipped mug, he realized that the forest around him had grown quiet in a different way. Not empty, just calm. The wind through the trees sounded softer. The creak of the porch boards beneath his feet had settled into a familiar rhythm. The air itself seemed to hum with quiet contentment. He looked at the house then, really looked. The boards were still uneven, the roofline imperfect, the paint patchy in places. But there was warmth glowing from the windows. Smoke curled gently from the chimney. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was home. The end.